I do love that we're sitting here trying to make sense of this.
Greetings, programs, and welcome to Tech Tales. I'm Corbin Davenport,
I'm Joe Fedewa.
And I'm Zachary Wander.
and today we are doing another movie club episode. We have all watched Tron, the 1982 science fiction adventure film written and directed by Steven Lisberger. And I will include a link in the show notes to where you can watch it legally if you want to watch it before listening to this episode. I believe as of when we're recording, it's only streaming on Disney Plus, but you can also buy and rent it from all the places where you can buy and rent movies. It stars Jeff Bridges as Kevin Flynn, a video game programmer who is sucked into a computer. He also plays Kevin Flynn's program Clue. There's also Bruce Boxleitner, who plays Alan Bradley, another programmer, and he also plays the program Tron. And there's also David Wayner as Ed Dillinger and Sark, Cindy Morgan as Laura Baines and Yori, and Bernard Hughes as Walter Gibbs and Dumont, and a couple other people. Before we get to the movie, I wanted to talk a little bit about the production of the movie because I think it definitely makes Tron a lot more interesting. So, Tron originated as a 30-second long backlit animation that was used to promote Lisberger's animation studio. They just kind of made this demo that looked cool. And it was this glowing man on a black background throwing these discs of light. And that was also sold to rock radio stations as TV ads to make some money for the animation studio. So Lisberger and his animation studio hoped to create Tron as an independent movie sometime after it finished these animated Olympic specials for NBC. So this was before the 1980 Summer Olympics, and they were making these animations of like animals doing the Olympics that were going to be like interjected in the broadcast as just something fun. I don't really know. But those specials were canceled as NBC significantly scaled back the coverage of the 1980 Olympics because the US and a bunch of other countries were boycotting it because it happened right after the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan and the Olympics were in Moscow.
Wait a minute. Do you have the year right? The 1980 Olympics were in Lake Placid, New York. It is 1980. Was there winter and summer in the same year, 1980?
Yes, there was.
What the heck?
Yeah, sorry, I forgot about that.
Never mind. Okay, continue.
So, Lisberger Studios suddenly needed more resources to create the Tron movie, so it was pitched to Disney after unsuccessfully approaching Warner Bros., MGM, and Columbia Pictures. None of those were interested, but Disney was. Disney executives thought the pitch was interesting, and the company was falling behind other studios in pushing boundaries in live action and animated movies. At the time, this was, well before the golden age of Disney animation, and most of their live action stuff at the time was like the Herbie movies. So they kind of needed something new. But it wasn't clear if the technology would work. So Disney asked Lisberger to film a test scene. It was filmed on a set with all white backgrounds using 35 millimeter black and white film. And they casted a Frisbee champion Sam Schatz as a program to throw disc in a costume. And I think he was like breaking out of a jail or something. And the test was successful and production on Tron went forward, but for filming the actual movie, they decided to switch to all black backgrounds because that was much easier to light. Now, the really crazy thing with Tron, all of the scenes in Tron that are in the computer world were animated like a traditional animated film, like a hand-drawn animation. So in all of the live action scenes, the actors had costumes that were mostly white. Like the lines on the costume were black. The background was black. and then each frame was printed and separated into different exposures for the costume, background, and faces. And then all that was combined by animators using custom film developed by Kodak specifically for this movie. The simpler scenes had around 6 to 7 layers, and more complex scenes had more than 20. Um, so this is just a lot of like manual animation work, which is ironic for being a movie set in a computer, that computers actually didn't have much to do with making this movie. One of the fun things that happened during production was a flickering effect was present in some scenes because of an error in the animation process. I think they were using like some of the cells like out of order of when they were supposed to be used. But fixing it would take too long, so instead they just added like sound effects in the movie to make them seem as like glitches. And you can see that when you're watching the movie. I think it happens when like they're in sort of the jail before the games and the lights are like flickering. It happens in a couple parts. That's kind of
I
funny.
think I did notice that. Yeah.
It was weird seeing, like, it looks like bad green screen.
Yeah, it when you're watching the
That
movie, the like especially
the
like
masking is really
yeah,
bad.
the edges of people have sort of like the same thing you get with like hand drawn, where it's not like a perfectly straight line or like consistent from frame to frame. It is like flickering. Now, Tron wasn't the first film to use computer generated images, but it was one of the first to use CGI on a large scale for entire scenes. The CGI was completed by Information International Inc., Mathematical Applications Group Inc., Robert Abel and Associates, and Digital Effects. None of those companies exist today, as far as I know. And there were definitely issues with that part as well. One of the things that came up was it turned out to be more difficult than they thought to align the camera backgrounds with the CGI images. So, like, where someone was supposed to stand, like, wasn't calculated right because the software they were using couldn't account for lens distortion and other effects like that. So they had to keep like moving the backgrounds around manually to sort of
Oh
make sure like
God.
someone was still standing like on a platform or wherever they were supposed to be. And also, depending on the scene, some frames took up to 6 hours to produce. But we do eventually get a movie out of it.
We sure did. I started taking notes in the beginning of the movie and then I stopped.
And then you fell asleep.
Well, the last thing I wrote is, now that is a big door.
Which big door was that?
It's
The-
that's when he
It
says
was the big
The
door.
security door?
He says the line, now that is a big door.
I had to write down, meanwhile, in the real world.
Yeah, I remember that. I like the big door, and then I like in Tron Legacy when they have another big door, and he
Exactly.
says, "Whoa, that's a big door." So the movie starts with it's at Flynn's arcade, and someone is playing a Tron Light Cycle arcade machine in the arcade, which is really funny because after this movie, Disney teams up with I think Midway to make actual Tron arcade cabinets. So those do exist in real life.
The
But
game's not called Tron though that they're playing.
uh,
It's just called like Light Cycle or something.
yeah, it's not called Tron in the movie, but they're playing this light cycle game, and then the movie kind of like zooms in to show the game in the computer. And the person sort of playing the game is like one program, and then the like computer player is Sark. Immediately brings up the point that I don't think I understand, which is like every computer and game system in this world like networked?
Yeah, that was my question. Everything seems to be networked.
Yeah, because Sark is
They've got the internet.
in that initial game cabinet. Like you see his face, and then like afterwards he goes to his boss, which is the master control program, and he's like, you got to stop giving me these easy ones." So I think it's the same Sark. It's not like a duplicate. I don't know.
Well, they seem to treat programs as entirely unique.
Yeah.
Like, if there is a program, there is no other version of that program. That program is a person.
Yeah, so I'm not entirely clear on that point, but that's okay. Um, so Sark is sort of established as the, I guess, like military ruler of the grid, or the one in charge of like whatever the military is. He's taking orders from the Master Control Program, which is this big evil program that is absorbing useful programs and then sending the rest to die in video games. So basically, Tron predicted bloatware. Master Control Program is the Facebook app.
Yes.
Then the movie cuts to Kevin Flynn, played by Jeff Bridges. He's hacking into Encom system using a stolen password, and he sends his program Clue to retrieve some data. And this is when the movie establishes that the programs look exactly like the people who made them in real life, and they're also played by the same people. So Clue looks like Flynn. It's Jeff Bridges.
The only exception, though, is, and this is not a unique thought by me, I've heard other people say this about the movie, the Sark and Dillinger, like, Dillinger never has his own program. He's only ever just, like, talking to Master Control. There's not, like, a connection between Dillinger and Sark.
They're the same actor.
I know they're the same actor, but I'm
In
saying
universe,
his
Corbin.
Dillinger doesn't have a program. He's always just using Master Control.
Oh yeah, yeah. I don't know if it's established if he made Sark or not, but yeah, he's always talking to the MCP, which I definitely wrote as MCU multiple times in my notes. I had to, but yeah, so Clue is attacked and captured by these enemy ships that they're called recognizers. I don't really know how to describe them. They're like sort of like rectangle things with legs, and they sort of like step on.
It's like an upside down U shape.
Yeah, yeah,
That's square.
They look pretty cool.
yeah. They are cool, and they're in Tron Legacy. And Clue is sent to the Master Control Program, where the MCP is asking who sent him. Clue won't say anything, and then so he's killed, which in the computer world is called derezzed. They have a cool name for it.
Do we know what it's supposed to stand for? Like, is it
De-resolution.
de-resolution?
Yeah.
It is, yeah, it is. The thing that I wrote, I don't remember what exactly was happening, but in my notes during this like intro part of the movie, I wrote, "No idea what's going on," and that was my
That's
thought
just the whole
as
movie.
I was like, if I'm watching this as someone who has never seen this before and has no idea what I'm about to be watching, it's the beginning of this movie is so like, what is happening? What is this?
It also takes a really long time to happen.
Yeah, it's. I know they're trying to do a show not tell, but it does take a while to like fully figure out what's happening if you've never seen this movie before. And also, I would
I mean, I
imagine.
wrote down multiple times where they just narrated to themselves.
Yeah.
Like, I've got to get to the central whatever.
Well, I feel like the movie should have started in the real world, and there's like the scene where Tron or where Flynn eventually gets in there, and they're in like the prison or whatever. I feel like that should have been the first time you see the programs, because they kind of like explain the whole program thing in that scene, and I'm like, this could have been a better introduction to the
Yeah.
grid or whatever.
Yeah, because
And then they barely spend any time on the actual games part, which is like the main part of the movie description. Like, he's thrown into gladiatorial style games. He does 1.5, and then the rest of the movie is walking through fun geometric landscapes.
that is a good subtitle for this movie: Fun Geometric Landscapes.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
shouldn't have
yeah,
called it the grid. Just call it that.
yeah. That is probably making it more complicated. Is like, I think like they did that because they were like very excited about how cool the movie looked, so they wanted to show it off immediately. But it does kind of make it more complicated. I would imagine also this movie would be much more complicated in 1982, when most people didn't have computers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And on a budget of $17 million, which is small even for
I
1982.
think the people not having computers works in its favor though, because another thing I wrote down in this part of the movie was they are saying complete nonsense, and they can say complete nonsense because no one knows.
That was something like when they, for whatever reason, they replaced to think with to calculate. They were like, what does he
Yeah.
calculate he's going to do with all those programs? And then later in the movie, they just completely give up on that and they say, what do you think you're doing? Or like, I need you not to think. And it was just like, what was the point of that line?
So then the movie switches back to the real world, and we see
And it
Ed
tells
Dillon.
you.
Yeah, it tells you, it says back in the
Meanwhile,
meanwhile in the real world.
in the real world,
Um, as if that wasn't very clearly indicated by the fact that the computer world is completely black and the real world it looks like the real world, but that's fine. So the movie cuts to Ed Dillinger going to his office, who's like this senior executive person at this company called Encom, which I usually when like movies like this have a fictional company, they're like very obviously riffing off of a real life company. I don't know if it's because this movie's from 1982, so maybe there's references I don't get, but I don't feel like that was the case with Encom. It's just kind of like this like generic like technology company.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing the like name sounds similar to is Enron. Also, I will say, pretty badass logo, Encom.
I do really like the logo.
That first shot of the like neon red and black helicopter with the Encom logo, it's like, oof, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. So Ed Dillinger is sort of summoned to his office by the master control program, and he gets to his office, and I want to talk about his like computer desk for a second because it's really cool.
It
he
is
has like
amazing.
he has like a giant like black desk in his office, and I guess the entire top part is like a touchscreen, and he's shown like typing on a touchscreen keyboard on his table, and then like security cam footage shows up on like one corner, and then on the other corner is like the text of whatever the master control program is telling him. It's very cool.
yeah.
At his very cool desk, the MCP warns Dillinger that someone, likely Kevin Flynn, is attempting to hack into their systems, and
He's not sure, but it felt like
it felt
Flynn.
like Flynn.
Somehow the MCP knows a lot about Flynn, but I guess not what he looks like.
And Dillinger shuts down most access to the network as a precautionary measure. Also, in this conversation, and every other time the MCP speaks, uh, it ends all conversations with "end of line," which then kind of becomes like a line that gets brought up over and over again with these movies. I think in Tron Legacy, the big like sky club thing they're in is the "end of line club," I think.
Yeah.
But
There's
you see
some
that,
point in that movie where Jeff Bridges says like "end of line, man," and it's awesome.
yeah. Stay tuned for the Tron Legacy movie club episode, which will be 5 hours long.
Should we talk about what the master control program visually looks like in the computer world? The face.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't
What
see it
is
until
that?
much. Well, no, we do because we see it when he's derezzing Clue. We see his
Mhm.
face. It is extremely silly.
It's so funny.
It's
I don't
They
even
took a
know how to
face,
describe it. It's
stretched
like,
it around a cylinder,
yeah.
and then made the bottom of the cylinder a pointy cone.
it kind of looks like if like MODOK from Marvel was like in a computer and much bigger and
Yeah.
And
had no
1980.
other body. It was just the face.
It's
It's
evil
very
Legends
weird.
of the Hidden Temple, whatever that thing is called.
So then the movie cuts to Alan Bradley, who is a programmer at Encom, and he's annoyed because he is locked out from his files. And he goes to Dillinger's office to ask why. Dillinger says the lockout is only for a few days for security, and Alan mentions that he is working on Tron, which is an independent security program that could monitor the whole system and the MCP. And then after Bradley leaves, the MCP gets like really annoyed with Dillinger, because if Tron was running, then it would detect that the MCP is hacking into a bunch of other computer systems.
Like the Pentagon that they throw out there
Yeah,
Mhm.
and then never mention again.
they said the MCP wanted to hack the Pentagon and Russian state systems, which surprises Dillinger, who thought it was still only breaking into like other companies'
I
networks.
love too how it says that it could run things. I didn't write it down, but like it gave a range of percentage more efficiently than humans. Like this computer didn't even know for sure how much more efficient it could be. It was just like, well, it could be like maybe this much more.
It was a lot, yeah.
Didn't give
Just
the specific.
Yeah, and then after it says that, Dillinger gets kind of like freaked out, like, okay, buddy, like I don't know what you're doing. And then the MCP blackmails him into keeping quiet. And then at the same time, the movie then cuts again to Laura Baines and Walter Gibbs in the Incom laboratory, I guess. It's like a big lab thing with lasers. And they are testing a digitizing beam that turns a physical object into data and then returns it, which will become important later.
They do an orange.
They yeah.
Which
Obviously,
I'm thinking now of later in the movie, and I'm like, is there just a pile of oranges somewhere in the grid?
also
Yeah, they never bring the oranges back.
Also, more important question. Okay, we've established they do the test on the orange. It's like, all right, the movie has established that the computer can digitize an orange, so naturally it should also be able to digitize a person and put them inside the computer game.
Well, Jeff Bridges shares a lot of DNA with an orange.
Sure, of course.
Kevin Flynn shows up as a human-shaped orange. Oh no!
As
Oh no!
annoying
What have we
orange.
done?
This is where annoying orange is from.
Oh no. Um,
The effect that they do on the digitizing, like the orange and eventually Flynn, is pretty cool.
Those were probably the 6-hour frames.
yeah, they get broken into like a grid, and you see the laser like suck one of the little cubes out one by one. It's kind of pretty cool. Um,
But then when he comes back to the real world, it's just all at once.
yeah. Well, they ran out
Well,
of
they were
Because they
budget
done.
didn't
by
want to
that point.
animate it
Yeah.
again.
We want to go home now.
uh, so Alan meets with Laura in the lab, and they figure Flynn is the one trying to hack into Encom, and they go meet Flynn at his arcade, where Flynn does admit that's what he's trying to do. This is also when the movie establishes that Flynn is supposed to be like a really good programmer and also really good at video games, which becomes important when he's sucked into a computer game.
And also has a really cool like hangout spot above the arcade.
Yeah, yeah. He's just very cool
He's very cool.
because he's Jeff Bridges.
Yes.
So then Flynn does the customary info dump for the movie. We find out that 3 years prior, Flynn was a programmer at Encom and started working on video games in his spare time. And then another programmer, Ed Dillinger, steals his game files and presents them to Encom as his own work without even changing the names of the games. And Dillinger gets a big promotion from that, and Flynn leaves the company at some point. It's not clear to me if he was fired or if he just quit. I don't know if they ever said that part.
I don't
think
think
so.
they made it clear.
So yeah, and then since then he's just, I guess, been running his arcade.
I do think it was a little funny that it's just like this Dillinger guy is like, hey, look at these great games, and like, you should be CEO now.
That's how.
No.
That's how
Senior executive president.
Yeah. So then, like, kind of in that conversation, Alan mentions that if his Tron program was running, it could probably find evidence of the stolen work and shut something down. I'm not really sure, or I guess shut the MCP down. And Flynn says that if he can get to a computer terminal inside Encom, he could probably bypass the security lockout. So then they could run Tron and all that fun stuff. So Flynn, Alan, and Laura break into the Encom laboratory after hours, which is when we get the great
With
scene of them.
no convincing necessary.
Yeah.
Let's make that clear. Flynn is like, hey, this guy stole my games. Here's absolutely no proof of that, and I think he's got the files somewhere. And the other two are just like, okay,
Yeah.
let's go break in.
They're all just, that's what you do for your friends. You break into your company after hours.
You're
And
not down for adventure, Zach? Come on.
I don't think Alan knew Flynn beforehand.
yeah, he did.
What do you mean?
Yeah,
Well, he
they
knew
were-
that
they were-
him and his current girlfriend Laura had dated or something. He knew that much.
Yeah, but it doesn't seem like they actually knew each other personally at
Yeah,
that
maybe
point. They just knew
not.
of each other.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, my girlfriend's ex. Yeah, let's help him break into this building.
That's what you do for friends.
Well, I think
yeah.
they did establish that like Alan is also upset at the whole situation, so that was his motivation.
Yeah, which
kinda weak.
that struck me as really weird watching this movie, where like he gets locked out of like what he's working on, and I think anyone else watching that would be like, "Oh, I don't have to do work today. All right, that's great."
Yeah.
But he's like so mad about it. He's like, "I wanted to finish Tron."
They love programming.
Yeah. So yeah, they break into the Encom laboratory, and we get the great scene of them opening a giant door, to which Flynn says, "Now that's a big door."
It was a big door.
It was a very big door.
I don't understand why it had so many layers.
Yeah, I wonder where they what the actual like that location where they filmed all this in. I wonder what it actually is. Same as the the laser area.
Yeah.
It's just a curtain.
So they break in and they leave Flynn alone at a terminal, which conveniently is directly in front of the laser that was being used to digitize the orange. And Flynn starts working, and the MCP speaks to him and tells him to stop, and he doesn't. So the MCP turns on the laser and digitizes Flynn into the computer.
Got him.
I think the implication there was that was the MCP's plan the whole time. Like he was, like when Flynn started hacking in, it felt like the MCP was putting on an affected panic. Like, oh no, don't do that. Don't keep working at the terminal facing away from this digitizer.
He was playing 3D chess or 4D chess.
Yeah.
Well, you know that MCP is so smart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you see his head?
So big.
There's a lot of room in that cylinder.
So Flynn wakes up in sort of like a loading area in the grid. He's kind of like pushed off to a sort of like holding prison area thing.
But before that, there's one heck of a kaleidoscope, insane computer. Yeah. the what they show like between that is so bizarre.
Yeah, that is like one of many parts in this movie where it makes the movie feel like just a very long tech demo. It's both a tech demo and just like a bunch of artists went so hard. And it makes for a very interesting looking movie. But there is like an extended sequence of like going into a computer and like things flying around, and like you're approaching like this like spherical thing with lasers pointing out, and it's pretty cool. And then it cuts to the MCP telling Sark that he has a new recruit for the games, and that he is a user and not a program. Flynn is a user, not a program. And the MCP wants Flynn to play in the games until he dies. So that's the goal.
But no funny business. Be fair about it.
Yeah, be fair about killing this guy. But that one of the few things that's actually established is, but weirdly, is that the MCP is trying to 1984 everyone, all the programs, into thinking users don't exist, and any programs that still believe that users exist are the ones that end up in the prison and having to participate in the games.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's
It's a very strange concept, and they call it like religion,
yeah,
a
yeah.
religion of users.
Yeah, users are like their god.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to talk about this later, but that is one of the like ongoing plot elements in this movie that like I don't know if really works, which is that users are basically like in the place of gods. So there's like a sort of like religious element in this movie where you have programs who believe in the users, that the users exist and they can talk to them, and then other programs who either don't believe or like Sark are sort of like telling people that it's nonsense. But
It's like it's a concept that
Yeah.
makes sense when you explain it, but the way that it is portrayed in the movie is not really well done.
yeah.
Yeah, it feels like someone came up with it and then just forgot most of the time that it was part of the movie. And just every so often there's a line or a scene or something that's like, oh yeah, we made a religion.
No, it's just sort of like an underlying theme in the whole movie is that like believing in users is like a religion.
Which is weird because most of the programs communicated directly with their users and they talked about doing that.
Right, before the MCP started like locking everyone off.
Never heard about praying before, Zach?
But
Yeah. Also, I did have in my
it's
notes that at one point later in the movie, Ram, one of the programs, says "Oh my users." I'm guessing instead of "Oh my god." But yeah, that was another part, like you were mentioning earlier, Zach, where like sometimes they did word search rounds and then other times they just completely forgot. So I guess, do y'all have any specific thoughts about like how the computer world looks? Because it is a very distinct look.
there's like three distinct looks. There's the light show, laser show, abstract stuff, where there's just a bunch of colored lines making abstract shapes and sort of outlining scenes. There's the 3D renders, which are very, very simple and smooth and linear.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the hand drawn sets that look very hand drawn.
Yeah.
The thing, like, so I saw Tron Legacy first, and then I like watched this eventually. And the thing that I always think is the neon like color on black in Tron Legacy looks so much cooler than the white suits in this movie. I don't know why the suits are white. It's very weird to
But
me.
so they could stand out against the black
I guess at that
set,
time
right?
they had to do that to make it stand out. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was mostly a technical limitation. Yeah, the costumes are a little bit weird. Um Definitely more like there's a lot going on them versus, yeah, like you said, like in Tron Legacy, when a lot of the clothes have a lot fewer lines that are glowing.
Mm-hmm.
Or sometimes they're just sort of like normal, like leather biker clothes, but like with some accent lighting. It's a very different look in this movie.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
obviously there's a huge time difference between the two, but like the costumes in this one look very dorky,
Yeah.
I would say. It's like they weren't even trying to make them look cool, because there is some cool stuff in this movie that looks pretty cool, like the computer on the table we were talking about and stuff, and like the NCOM logo and all that. And then these costumes just look very dorky.
Yeah. The world in the computer, it is very like some parts of it are very like abstract art. Like especially later in the movie when they get to the um like they're on the solar sailor and they're going past a bunch of these sort of like landscapes. Other parts are very like futurism, where it's like these big tall buildings with lights all over them. And I think it mostly looks cool. I do think sometimes it gets like a little bit too abstracty, where like I can't really tell where anything is.
I
Like
think it,
I remember watching the part where they're in like the jail, and everything is like wireframed and everything, and it's like, what are they like sitting on or leaning on? I don't
and then the
know.
Yeah.
guards are like on top of them.
Yeah.
I feel like for me where I think it loses some of the like coolness or effectiveness of what they were doing is when they have the big landscape shots. Like the solar sailor is a good example because you're seeing this like huge landscape around them, but there's like not a lot out there.
Yeah.
It's just like a lot of blankness.
Well, I think that was intentional because the MCP was like hiding in an isolated spot.
No, I
Hmm.
think the MCP
But
was supposed to be in the like center area. I think they said that.
yeah, but it's not like there's free travel to and from it. You have to
Right.
use those beams, and it the MCP has control over them or something.
Yeah, and well, we never also get like a good look at like where the programs are. Like that's the thing that like in Tron Legacy that's very easy, where you see like, oh, there's just a big city. You can see in the
Mm-hmm.
buildings there where they're traveling back and forth. But like here the movie goes from like, okay, they're in a room to like, oh, there's like a giant landscape. I don't know where like everyone's place in this is. And I guess that's maybe where it falls apart.
I think the funny thing is in that part we were talking about where he gets sucked into the computer world and you see all the crazy like spherical and lasers, and I think in part of that they're trying to show like the world of where the programs are. Like part of it kind of looks like they're zooming in on like a globe or something. I feel like they were like zooming in on a city inside the computer or something, but it's just not really shown that well. It's so abstract.
So Flynn is on the computer world now, and he's sent to a prison with other programs waiting for the games. And at this point, like I he thinks he's dreaming. I think is the implication. He's like, just so I can tell my friends like, what this dream was about. Where am I? And then you see Sark entering the sort of like prison area with his carrier, which it kind of looks like a flying aircraft carrier, but
I do really appreciate like in Tron Legacy how they basically kept the shape of a lot of these things and just made them look better.
yeah.
Like that ship, that carrier is in Tron Legacy also.
So yeah, so Sark is in his carrier. He's introducing the new recruits to the games. This is when he goes on the little mini rant about quote superstitious and hysterical belief in the users, quote, and how that will get you killed. And he also gives everyone their identity disc, which is the little like disc that goes on their back, that they said like sort of stores all of their memories and what they learn, but then that never comes up again. Mostly the
Yeah,
important
I
part
didn't
is just that
understand
it's a
that.
frisbee weapon. That's the main
I
important
didn't
part.
understand that. Like he said, if it breaks, then we will derez you. So, and like they
Yeah.
didn't have it
It's never made
beforehand, and they
sense.
still knew stuff.
Even in Tron Legacy, it doesn't make sense.
Well, in Tron Legacy, don't they at least like have it so if you lose it, you die automatically or something?
I don't think so.
Like there's an actual they
No.
It's
demonstrate
just the same thing of like,
consequences.
this is your identity disc. Don't lose this. Also, use this weapon to fight for your life.
Well, at least in Tron Legacy, the like the memory thing doesn't really come up, but like Flynn's disk being like the key to access in and out of the computer does become important. But you don't even get that in this movie. It's just like, all right, dude, use your frisbee, have fun.
And it does very much look like just a frisbee, by the way.
It is
Well,
absolutely just a painted frisbee.
They do use it one time when Tron himself sends up his disc to
Yeah.
Alan, who is somehow already knowing that they want to destroy the MCP at that point. And then he gets back a new disc, or his disc has been updated. And so if he throws it at the point of the cylinder, it destroys the MCP.
Yeah, he got a firmware update on his frisbee.
And that's something that is a little confusing, because they were like, when they were on the solar sailor or whatever, on one of the beams, and it started to have a power surge, and they were like, oh, we can't go to a different one. The next junction is like 2 nanoseconds away. Is this happening? Did the whole movie happen in like 2 seconds? And if it did, how did Alan have time to send something back in that exchange?
I do love that we're sitting here trying to make sense of this. No, Zach, it doesn't make sense.
I think the nanoseconds thing was probably just like the techno babble, like it wasn't intended to mean anything.
It's not even technobabble.
I know
it's
it's
just
not.
a
They're
normal
just
unit
using,
of measurement.
I know they're just using words wrong.
Remember, nobody knew about computers. They could say whatever they wanted to.
No one knew what a second was. Come on.
You could definitely tell this was at like the beginning of microcomputers becoming popular, because everything is micro.
Micro.
There's a microcycle as a time unit.
There was that time unit. Like, how long have you been here?
200 microcycles.
Yeah. What is that? 2 minutes?
What is a microcycle?
Americans will do anything but use the metric system.
That is the metric system.
Anyway, so when they're in like the battle prep thing, Flynn and Ram and whoever else is in that group walks past Tron. So we're introduced to Tron. He's throwing his frisbees.
And he's fighting for the users.
Quote, so I guess in the analogy, he's fighting for God. So
yeah, but why was he fighting for users? I thought he was a security program. I guess he's
a security program
there, but it's
against like other programs, though.
So Tron's doing a crusade.
Tron's a Quaker?
Crusades and Quakers are like polar opposites.
I don't know anything about Quakers other than oatmeal, Zach.
Quakerism is like, the whole point is being peaceful and grounded.
Well, that is kind
reflective.
of Tron, though.
They don't throw deadly frisbees at people.
No, but Tron is always like he's keeping things cool. He's the protection.
Except when he immediately thinks his friends are dead, and then when his friends immediately think he's dead.
Also, speaking of Tron, it has always been weird to me that the movies are named after Tron. He's not really a main character.
No, he's there. I guess it's because it sounds cool.
Yeah, that's entirely.
You can't name the movie Flynn.
This entire movie is just based entirely on what looks or sounds cool. That is the entire movie.
Except for the suits they wear.
Yeah, those are not cool. But yeah, Tron is interesting. In the documentary, they mentioned that before this movie, Bruce Boxleitner was mostly doing like Western movies. And like that totally makes sense when I'm watching this, and like the way he like talks is very like old-timey Western.
Yeah. I would say even like more so in Tron Legacy. He's pretty good in this movie though. Bruce. I don't know that there's really a like terrible performance by anyone in this movie. I think all the actors are pretty good.
Yeah.
I thought not.
Who did you think was bad?
I thought the directing was bad, because all of the actors felt equally, like, a lot of the deliveries felt really awkward and like monotonous. Like they were always speaking in the same sort of tone across the line and across scenes. I don't really know how to describe it well, but it didn't really feel like there was proper conveyance of emotions.
I think the issue was when they were in the computer, the programs are supposed to like. I think the idea was like they're acting sort of like the user who created them, but they're also kind of supposed to be more like robotic because they're a computer program. But then there's a lot of times where that's not true and they just act like normal people, and there's not really a like consistency there.
It was the acting, even in the real world, that felt a little strange to me.
It might have just been that I was entirely paying attention to Jeff Bridges. So Flynn is sent to a battle game. The the first one I don't know how to describe. It's kind of tennis, but it's
No, it's
it's
squash, right?
Yeah,
yeah,
they're using
it's
squash rackets.
probably yeah, it's closer to squash. And they've got a ball they're hitting back and forth, and when they miss the ball and it lands on the floor, it like removes part of the floor that they're on.
Looked pretty fun, not
The
gonna
floor
lie.
they're on is like a target,
Kind of want to play.
concentric. Are you going to play it over an endless void?
Well, you gotta have the endless void.
Yeah, you gotta have stakes. No fun without stakes.
That was one of the better looking parts of the movie. They used the abstract shapes and like the laser light effects pretty well there.
I really love the Jeff Bridges-ness in that scene. He's just like so, oh, okay. Yeah, this is game. I got this. He's very nonchalant about it.
Flynn and the program go back and forth in that game, and then the program like, you know, has part of the floor
Perishes.
taken out, and he's like hanging on a ledge, and Sark I guess is like watching in a room somewhere, and he's like, kill him, and Flynn is like, no. And then Sark presses the button
It's
that just
literally
removes.
what he does. He like throws a tantrum. He's like,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
It was so dramatic. Wait, where did all this come from?
So then Sark presses the button that like deletes the rest of the program's floor, and he dies or gets derezzed. I'm sorry. And
He dissolves into gold as he falls.
yeah, and Flynn gets sent to the light cycle game, and he's put on the same team as Tron. They're kind of like hitting it off because Flynn. So this entire like part of the movie, it's never clear to me what Flynn is thinking, because at first he like says like, oh, I'm in a dream, can you guys tell me where I am, when I tell my friends about this dream. And then yeah, he goes like nonchalant into the squash game, and then he gets like really like very panicky there. And then he goes to this, and when they're like in the loading area for the light cycles, he's like, my user wants me to take out the MCP, and Tron is like, oh, mine does too. So I guess like, does he think he's a program now? And
No, I think he was trying to hide that he was a user because he heard the whole speech about
Yeah.
if you think a user exists, then you're gonna be killed.
And he's just
And
trying
he's
to
like,
get
well,
people
if
to help him.
it is a little weird that he's like, it feels like he was planning escaping from the light cycle arena that whole time somehow.
yeah, it definitely like, I just wasn't, when I was watching, it wasn't clear to me like when that transition was between like he doesn't know where he is to like, oh, I know what I am and what I have to do. Especially because this entire sequence is like 8 minutes long.
It kind of feels like there's a scene missing. And that's something that I thought was a little weird too. Like the light cycles are probably one of the most memorable things from Tron.
For sure.
They barely showed up in this movie. They were there for like 5 minutes, and then it was the weird binder clip flying things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that was another thing where it's just like entirely technical limitations. Like it's just such a pain to mix the CG light cycles with the real actors inside, or even just have the light cycles on their own when it takes like 3 days to render like 1 minute of this movie.
I mean, even though in like Tron Legacy, there's only one light cycle scene also.
Well, there's one light cycle scene, and then like there's the bit where Flynn steals the old light cycle and goes into town. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I think the light cycles became a big part of Tron just because, like, didn't you say there was a video game made after the movie, right?
yeah, there was a Tron arcade cabinet that had light cycles, and I think one of the home console games was light cycles. So the light cycles in this bit are sort of like motorcycles that leave behind a light trail, and they turn at like 90-degree angles. So it's kind of like competitive Snake,
Yeah,
basically.
it really is.
I
And
like that high-speed competitive Snake.
the players die either when they crash into the other team's light rails, like the trail they're leaving behind, or they crash into a wall.
Or their own trail.
And leave a gaping
trail.
hole in the wall.
Yeah. Yeah, and they do the light cycle bit for a while. It's fun. Flynn, Tron, and Ram defeat the other team, and then they drive out of the like game arena bit through one of the holes left in one of the crashes earlier.
It's really a bug in the game that you hit the wall and a huge opening to the outside emerges.
And that's your way out. They are pursued by tanks as they're trying to get out, but they do eventually escape. Also, sort of made me think of like, what did you guys think about the music in this movie?
It felt underwhelming.
It's very
Like,
weird.
It felt like it didn't have any bass.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, did they synthesize it all or something? Because it felt like very small.
Yeah.
It was a lot of synth. The music was composed by Wendy Carlos, who had previously worked on the music for A Clockwork Orange in 1971 and The Shining in 1980. It is a mix of synthesizer music and orchestra. I don't know. I think there's a couple parts where it does sound really cool. Like I like the music when they were getting chased on the solar sailor later in the movie. But yeah, the rest of it.
See, that's the part I felt like was really underwhelming, because it was this giant ship bearing down on them, and then it was like these high-pitched trumpets going
It was
it just felt very
that was the
silly.
scene I also thought of too when you were talking about the music not being great. It's very underwhelming in the solar sailor part, I thought. I mean, it's no Daft Punk.
It's no, unfortunately not.
I do think the music in this movie does like contribute heavily to the just overall vibe of like, this is not a serious movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. It definitely helps reinforce the like, this is an abstract art project.
Art project is a good way to put it. Someone turned this in for their film school class.
So yeah, they get out of the light cycle game, and Tron wants to take down the master control program, and Flynn is like, I would also like to do that. So they head towards an input-output tower where Tron would be able to communicate with his user, Alan. Later, Sark's tanks catch up to them, and they pew-pew the light cycles. Tron thinks that the other two are de-rezzed, they're gone, so he
immediately he's like, okay, guess they're dead.
Yeah, well, he yells first, and then he goes.
Okay.
Yeah.
He has another tantrum.
Yeah. And then Flynn and Ram are like in some rubble somewhere. So Flynn like carries Ram to a like the remains of a recognizer ship. And then like Flynn sort of like touches one of the panels and the whole thing comes alive. And Ram's like, whoa, you're not supposed to be able to do that. And then
dies.
Yeah, then he dies.
He's fine. He's perfectly fine, and then he just decides to die.
Well, yeah, and then he's like, Flynn's like, yeah, I'm a user, and Sam's like, oh, that's Sam. Ram is like, oh, that's cool, and then dies.
I think I was sleeping during this part.
I think the writers were too. Well, the writer.
Yeah, so Tron, on his own little adventure, goes and meets Yori, which is the program created by Lori, very creative, who is operating the Solar Sailor, which is like a big like ship thing that flies on a like a beam of light, basically. It's not really clear what its intended purpose is. It just kind of looks cool.
That's a
Sailing
lot of
man.
this movie.
Yeah.
It feels like people who didn't know how computers work wanted to describe and illustrate how computers work in a way that people who didn't know how computers work would understand. So we ended up with a lot of metaphors that just didn't really make sense.
It's free public transit.
There's no free public
That's
transit in
that's why we
PCs.
don't understand it. So yeah, then they both leave to go to the IO tower. It's not clear to me why they don't just take the Solar Sailor at this point, but I guess it would just be like Tron fighting everyone to get it. I don't know.
Well, they went to the IO tower so that Tron could have his disc updated.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah,
And
they
then they
go they
meet
go
they
meet.
meet Dumont, who is sitting inside of a pyramid for some reason.
I
And
know.
it turns out he doesn't need that
That
I
is
was
later
the
just
on.
gonna
weirdest character design.
I was just gonna get to that, but yeah, they go meet Dumont at the tower, which is the program made by one of the like senior people at
The
Incom.
laser scientist.
Yeah, Tron asks to communicate with his users, and Dumont reluctantly agrees to help them. Again, like going back to the like religious analogy, he's like I guess sort
He's
of
an
supposed to
oracle.
be, yeah. Well, I think he's supposed to be like a priest, maybe.
He's an oracle.
Um, and the whole tower is like definitely supposed to be like a temple thing. Um,
Yeah.
he
But
he does he
I
does have
don't
an
think
extremely silly costume though.
I don't think reluctant is the right way to describe it. At first he's just like, no, never, never, not gonna happen. And then I don't even remember what they say. I think it's just that the bad guys show up at a window and he's like,
Yeah.
okay, go on through. Very
So
weird.
yeah. So Tron communicates with Alan. Alan gives Tron the code on his disk that will destroy the MCP if he throws his identity disk into the MCP's like neck, basically. Whatever the part under his head is. Uh, so yeah.
It's
So
a
then
critical artery.
So yeah, Tron and Yori escape into the Solar Sailor that can take them to the Master Control Program's base, I guess.
So
Like his
this
big
is
thing.
something I didn't realize or I didn't like think of until a few minutes ago, but I think the master control program is just another IO tower controller because you see when he dies, he's in the
Yeah.
stupid pyramid costume.
He also has a pyramid costume, yeah. Maybe.
So I think he's just at an IO tower.
He's like
And he somehow
another.
made it so that he's the only point of access, except however Flynn got in.
Flynn is, he's just hanging around. He jumps onto the Solar Sailor while they're escaping, and then they're all like talking after the ship is going, and he tells Tron and Yori that he is a user, and both of them are just kind of like, okay,
Cool.
yeah, that's basically it.
And there's a little bit of a funny religious or parallel of like, oh, we thought users always knew what they were doing. And they're like, let me tell you a secret. They don't. And it's like, aha, God doesn't know what he's doing or whatever.
Which religion is that where Jeff Bridges is God?
The correct one.
Mine.
I think I could get behind that one.
Wait, is Jeff Bridges problematic?
Don't Google it. I don't want to know. Keep talking, Corbin.
There's no controversies section on his Wikipedia.
Eventually, Sark's carrier catches up to the Solar Sailor. It destroys the sailor, and then Flynn and Yori are arrested. Tron is believed to be dead, but then they show him like hanging on to the edge of the carrier. Don't really know how that happened. Doesn't
This
matter.
is another part where they just immediately accept that someone's dead.
Does not.
It's
Yeah.
like, oh, I can't see him anymore, so he's dead.
They're
There's
computer
no object
programs. They
permanence
have
in this
no.
movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Something we forgot to mention, like in the chase scenes when he was flying the ship, the recognizer, and the bit showed up.
Oh yeah, I
The
love the
bit
bit.
is so weird.
Yeah.
Like
But
they were like, oh, it's a bit. It can only say yes or no, but also it has an entire internal state and can understand things. That's not a bit.
it's fine. I love that Tron is also a movie that has to have like a funny little character. Like this is
For
like
two
it.
seconds.
Yeah, it is like Minions, right? That's what the bit is. It's just a funny little thing that makes noises.
Where's the bits movie?
Where's the bit minion? Or where's the bit plushie? I mean,
Yeah, that would be good. So, Sark leaves the carrier with all the captured programs and takes them to the master control program. And then, like, after they get there, while the MCP is like sucking the life force out of the programs, they're like, "Oh, guys, Tron's still here." And Sark's like, "Oh!" And then they go out and fight. Uh, so while they're tussling, Flynn jumps into the MCP's like beam to, I think they said, distract it long enough for Tron to throw his disc into like the center part.
I don't
I
think they said that ahead of time. He was just like, I'm jumping in. I won't tell you why.
Flynn jumps in and Tron throws his disc and the MCP like explodes in a very funny way.
No, you're forgetting a very important part of the movie. Tron and Sark fight for a while, and then Tron chucks his frisbee at Sark, cuts his skull open.
Mm-hmm.
Little weird shapes fall out like
Like
brain
little
matter,
crystals like come out of his head.
mm-hmm.
and he falls on his face, and then the MCP's like, oh, we can't have that. I'm giving you my functions. And he comes back to life as like
Oh
a
yeah, yeah,
zombie
yeah.
and gets
He comes
very
back
huge
huge.
and gigantic and does absolutely nothing. He
Yeah,
walks up behind Tron, Tron sees him, runs through his legs, and that's basically all we see of him.
that was so funny. The MCP was like, he clicked the like allow administrator access button on Sark, and that's why he got so big. Again, like this movie is just things that look cool, like having a big like monstrous size program like throwing discs. Like I guess sure that looked cool.
Having someone's brain fall out
Yeah.
digitally.
Yeah, so the MCP and Sark are both derezzed, and then like sort of the entire computer world changes colors and lights up, and you see like all the other IO towers lighting up because now they can talk to users again.
Oh, wait. Another important part.
Okay.
Um, it's pretty clear in the movie that Tron and Yori have a relationship of some sort. Like they're in love,
Right. Right.
kind of sort of reflecting the real world. And then when it seems like when they think Tron has died, when they immediately accept it, the
Oh
first thing
yeah.
they do is kiss.
But then it's like, she seems like that was like a what is this? Like kissing, like what? Like she doesn't understand it because she eventually kisses Tron, and then he is like, oh, what was that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was just
They were
like
just pals before, yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. So yeah, all the programs can talk again, and then Flynn is re-energized into the real world, and then next to him, like a printer prints out, I guess, the proof that his work was stolen. And this part was so funny to me because I'm like, oh yeah, that's why he was in the computer. Like that seems so not important now.
but also one, how did that end up happening? Two, why did it seem to be like the MCP's Death Note?
Yeah, that's
And
what I was wondering,
three,
because
it's just
the
some text on a dot matrix paper.
yeah
No,
yeah
no,
and
no.
Ooh.
That's cold, hard evidence. You can't just type anything on paper, Zach.
And then that's like the next scene after that is Dillinger trying to talk to the MCP in his office, and that same text shows up on his computer, and he sits down defeated, like, well, I guess it's over, because
well
this
They got
text
me.
showed up on my screen.
the
They
jig
boomed
is
me.
up, boys. Yeah, not really clear what how that worked, but that's okay. And then the last scene in the movie is Flynn getting out of the same Incom helicopter that Dillinger was in at the
But during
start,
the day,
and he's during the day, so it doesn't look cool. And he's meeting Alan and Lori on the pad, and he walks up and says, "Greetings, programs," and then the movie ends.
and he's only there for an hour.
Yeah,
He got a helicopter ride to the top of his office building that he was probably already at, and then he told the helicopter pilot to come back in an hour to pick him up.
right. Yeah, the implication in that scene is that Flynn is now the boss,
The
because
boss.
that's also how companies work.
Well, there could have been a lawsuit. You know, any judge who would see a piece of paper with some printed text on it in
That's true.
1982
That's true. That was
gonna
very,
accept
very
that.
good evidence. So yeah, that's Tron.
Very silly movie. I'm remembering the fight scene where Tron and Yori are at some computer doing something, I don't remember what, and enemies start showing up and Tron is fighting them. The choreography is so slow. It's like, okay, you walk up to me and wait for a second while I grab your weapon and pull it away, and then I'll stand still while you try to punch,
Hey,
and
you
then I'll
don't want
knock
anyone
you off
getting
the
hurt,
edge.
Zach.
But also when Flynn was there in disguise, because he can also magically disguise himself as red instead of blue if he touches them, which is something weird that never comes up after that. Tron accidentally hits him on this narrow bridge, and you see Jeff Bridges fall to the floor, roll over like twice to, quote, fall off the edge and hang on. It was really funny watching that.
Yeah, I mean, it really is just one of those movies. There's a lot of old movies like this, I feel like, that you can say, yeah, that wouldn't be made today.
Yeah, and definitely part of the motivation for this was like Disney not having anything cool and interesting, and for whatever else you can say about this movie, it is interesting.
It is. And
it's
I
it's
do.
it's very different, and quite literally because of the like custom like animation sheets that were made for this movie and everything else. Like there is not another movie like this.
I do give Disney credit for like being like, what the heck? Let's do it. Put this weird ass movie out there.
Bob Iger would never.
No, they wouldn't. It's true. It's like, oh, it's too risky. We can't do something like that. Make another Toy Story movie.
This wouldn't make money. Let's make a new Marvel movie that makes $4 million.
Tron would have to be in the Marvel Cinematic
MCU.
Universe. Yeah. Yeah, the
Spider-Tron.
movie ends with like Nick Fury sitting in the corner of like Tron's room. It's like I'm putting together a team.
Dumont will return.
In his pyramid.
Tron was released in theaters on July 9th of 1982. It got mostly positive reviews, mostly just people saying kind of what we're saying is like, it looks really cool, but there's like not really a plot. it just it's just kind of there. Disney released several video games based on the movie that were like the games from the movie. There was an arcade cabinet by Midway Games, and there's also home console games for the Intellivision and Atari 2600. One interesting thing with this movie after it was released was that the Motion Picture Academy refused to nominate it for a special effects award because, according to Lisberger, the Academy thought using computers was cheating.
Yeah, it's very funny.
Tron made 33 million in theaters in the United States and Canada, and another 17 million in other countries, becoming Disney's highest grossing live action movie for 5 years.
That's kind of wild.
Yeah. Um, but it was still seen as a financial disappointment, and there were no immediate plans for a sequel. But over time, it definitely got more of a cult classic following. In 2003, Disney published a video game called Tron 2.0, which was developed by Monolith Productions, and it functions as a sequel to this movie. Both Bruce Boxleitner and Cindy Morgan come back as voice actors for that game. It's still just like a one-off game, like nothing really comes from that. And then finally in 2005 there starts to be work on a possible sequel, and then that continues development, and eventually we get Tron Legacy in 2010.
Oh yeah.
It takes a very long time, but we do eventually get another Tron movie, which again we will do an episode of at some point in the future. Yeah, that's I think that's all we have to say about Tron. um does anyone have anything to promote? Zach, do you have anything? Do you want to go?
I don't have anything.
Okay, great job. What about you,
Thanks.
Joe?
You can follow me on Mastodon, I guess. Talshmo at mass.to.
TechTales is also on Mastodon at TechTales at mas.to, and on Twitter at TechTales Show. The links for those are in the show notes. Also in the show notes is the link to where you can currently watch the movie legally, and maybe that documentary if I can find it online. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back in your podcast feed soon.